Retro Road Test, 1979 Ford Escort van vs Morris Marina van. In an era when Britain's roadways were dominated by practical, no-nonsense commercial vehicles, two mainstays of the light van sector stood out in 1979, the Ford Escort van and the Morris Marina van. Built on the backbones of popular saloon cars, these vans promised affordability, simplicity, and reliability for tradesmen, small businesses, and fleet managers alike. But while both served the same purpose, their approaches differed in key areas such as handling, durability, economy, and driver comfort. This road test dives deep into both vans to determine which was the better buy in 1979 and which one still earns classic credentials in retrospect. Exterior design and dimensions. Neither the Escort van nor the Marina van will win any design awards by modern standards, but both were practical and reasonably well proportioned for the time. The 1979 Ford Escort van, based on the Mk2 Escort platform, retained the car's crisp lines and square-edged styling. The van variant did away with rear seats and windows, replacing them with steel panels and a relatively flat roofline. It measured approximately 4.0 meters in length and featured a 1.3 m wide load bay. The Morris Marina van, by contrast, had a slightly more elongated and angular shape, derived from the Marina saloon. It featured longer overhangs and a less compact design, although its dimensions were broadly similar to the Escort, around 4.1 meters in length. The Marina's styling, even then, was widely considered a bit dated compared to the sharper Escort. From a visibility and ergonomics perspective, the Escort had the edge. The Marina's thick pillars and more sloped rear created blind spots, while the Escort offered better overall vision for parking and maneuvering. Winner, Ford Escort van. Interior and driver comfort. Inside, the vans are predictably sparse, reflecting their utilitarian purposes. Expect vinyl seats, basic plastic dashboards, and minimal creature comforts in either van. The Ford Escort van offered a driver-focused dash layout with intuitive switchgear borrowed directly from the Escort car range. The seat, while not luxurious, offered decent lumbar support and the pedals were well spaced. The gear lever was placed conveniently and the steering wheel was of a sensible size and thickness. The Morris Marina van was even more basic. While some variants featured improved dash moldings post-1978 facelift, it still felt more dated than the Escort. The seat adjustment was rudimentary, and the driving position could feel awkward for taller drivers. The gear change also required a longer reach due to a less well-angled lever. Neither van offered a radio as standard in 1979. However, Ford's superior parts availability and optional extras catalog meant it was easier for buyers to spec up the Escort to a slightly more civilized level. Winner, Ford Escort van. Load capacity and practicality. This is where the battle gets interesting. Payload and internal space were critical in this market. The Ford Escort van had a payload capacity of around 610 kilograms, with a flat load bay offering about 46 cubic feet of space. The rear doors opened wide, and the loading lip was low, which made it easy to lift heavier items in and out. Tie-down points were limited but functional. The Morris Marina van outclassed the Escort slightly in raw figures. It offered a payload of around 660 kilograms, and its load bay was marginally longer. In practice, this meant the Marina could carry a little more weight and accommodate longer items. However, the raised floor over the rear suspension limited space slightly, and the rear doors didn't open as wide as the Escorts. If you were regularly transporting heavier or awkward loads, the Marina had a small but tangible advantage. Winner, Morris Marina van. Engine and performance. Both vans were available with modest petrol engines, and neither was designed with speed in mind. However, the Escort was more modern and efficient. The 1979 Escort van was most commonly equipped with the 1.3-litre Kent Crossflow engine, producing around 55 bhp. This engine was well regarded for its reliability, and in van form, it gave a top speed of around 85 miles per hour, with 0 to 60 miles per hour arriving in approximately 17 seconds. More importantly, it was torquey and flexible at low speeds, ideal for urban delivery work. The Morris Marina van typically used the 1.3-litre A-series engine, also developing around 53 bhp. It had similar performance figures on paper, 85 miles per hour top speed and 0 to 60 in around 18 seconds, but in practice, it felt less refined and required more revving to keep up with traffic. Fuel economy for both vans hovered around 30–36 miles per gallon, depending on load and driving conditions. The Escort had better throttle response and felt more willing under acceleration, especially when unladen. Winner, Ford Escort van. Handling and ride comfort. This is perhaps the area with the starkest contrast. The Ford Escort van inherited the excellent handling trays of the Escort saloon, while the Marina van suffered from its underpinnings. The Ford Escort van used McPherson struts at the front and a live axle with leaf springs at the rear. Despite the crude rear setup, the Escort managed to deliver tidy handling with reasonable cornering grip and a surprising degree of agility. The steering was light but communicative, and body roll was well controlled. On winding B roads, the Escort could even be fun to drive. The Morris Marina van retained the much criticized lever arm front dampers and rear leaf springs. The result was an unsettled ride and woolly handling. The front end felt vague at speed, and mid-corner bumps upset the vehicle's composure. The Marina understeered heavily when pushed and suffered from body roll and nosedive under braking. While the Marina was acceptable at lower urban speeds and under light loads, it felt outdated and cumbersome compared to the Escort when driven briskly. Advertisement. Privacy settings. Winner, Ford Escort van. Brakes, gearbox and steering. The Escort came with front disc brakes and rear drums, which performed well in most situations. The Marina also used a disc forward/drum setup, but braking feel and fade resistance weren't as good, particularly under load. The Escort's 4-speed manual gearbox was a slick, short-throw affair. Gear changes were clean and positive. The Marina's gearbox, on the other hand, was long of throw and occasionally imprecise, especially when cold. As for steering, both vans had unassisted racks, but the Escorts felt lighter and more responsive, especially during parking maneuvers. Winner, Ford Escort van. Reliability and maintenance. By 1979, both Ford and British Leyland had amassed significant production experience, but their reputations diverged in this area. The Ford Escort van was supported by a widespread and competent dealer network. The Kent engine was easy to work on and spares were cheap and abundant. Most mechanics were intimately familiar with the platform, and regular maintenance could be performed with minimal tools. The Morris Marina van, however, was notorious for its variable build quality and electrical gremlins. The A-series engine was tough, but the rest of the vehicle, particularly the bodywork and suspension, suffered from cost-cutting and inconsistent assembly standards. Parts availability in 1979 wasn't quite as robust as Ford's, especially in more rural areas. In terms of rust protection, Neither van was outstanding, but the Marina was particularly prone to corrosion in the sills, wheel arches, and door bottoms. Winner, Ford Escort van. Fleet use and public perception. In 1979, both vans were used extensively by tradesmen, councils, and fleet buyers, but the Ford Escort van had become the go-to choice for organizations like British Telecom, Royal Mail, and local authorities. Its ease of maintenance, low running costs, and solid reputation for reliability made it a fleet favorite. The Marina van, though cheaper in some configurations, was considered the more budget option and was often associated with cost-conscious buyers or smaller firms. Resale values reflected this too. Used Escort vans held their value better than their Marina counterparts, thanks to stronger residual demand and a broader market appeal. Winner, Ford Escort van. Final verdict. Category winner. Exterior styling Ford Escort van. Interior comfort Ford Escort van. Load capacity Morris Marina van. Engine and performance Ford Escort van. Handling and ride Ford Escort van. Brakes and gearbox Ford Escort van. Reliability and maintenance Ford Escort van. Fleet use and perception Ford Escort van. The Ford Escort van wins in nearly every category. It was a more modern, better engineered product with superior driving dynamics, reliability, and usability. The Morris Marina van, while slightly better in payload, was ultimately let down by poor handling, dated design, and variable build quality. Conclusion. If you were a tradesman in 1979 Britain looking for a dependable light van, the Ford Escort van was clearly the more attractive and sensible choice. Even today, among classic vehicle enthusiasts, the Escort van is often fondly remembered and remains more collectible than its Marina counterpart. The Marina van, though not without merit, was always fighting an uphill battle against better competitors, and nowhere was this more evident than in its showdown with the Escort.